Every complex Kubernetes system starts with a simple question. How do you know what's actually happening inside it? In this episode of KubeFM, I spoke with Oleksii, who's a senior architect at Mirantis, about how he approaches workload assessment, from understanding business requirements to mapping infrastructure, dependencies, and resource interactions across clusters. Oleksii breaks down the mindset and tools that make architecture reviews meaningful, from Helm and K9s to visual frameworks that can't reveal what text alone can't. It's a deeply technical conversation that connects theory to real-world operational insight. This episode is sponsored by Stormforge by Cloudbolt. Ever wonder how much your Kubernetes workloads are really costing you, or how much you're wasting? Stormforge uses machine learning to automatically right-size your apps, so you can cut spend without cutting performance. It's optimization that just runs in the background while you focus on shipping code. Learn more in the episode description. Now, let's check out the conversation with Oleksii. Welcome to KubeFM. What 3 emerging Kubernetes tools are you keeping an eye on?
So I would say that besides of the Kubernetes itself, it would be obviously one of the major products that Mirantis currently have is the Coordinate. So I keep an eye on it. Then I would say that a K9s, because I widely use it in my daily work. And it might be a KubeGraph. It's an interesting thing that I'm looking after.
Okay. For people that aren't familiar with it, can you just give us a quick summary?
So the Coordinate is the multi-cluster manager. So the idea behind is that we have a management cluster that runs the system that allows you to run multiple child Kubernetes clusters and manage the workloads, or let's say the applications that will be installed on top of these child clusters. Also, it allows to managing these applications can be as the actual workload, like you want to install your, website, for example, or any application that you would like as the user to run, or it can be like an enhancement or an addition to the management footprint. So this is multi-cluster management for the infrastructure of the Kubernetes, as well as for running the applications on top. The K9s is the terminal-based viewer for the Kubernetes. So you can browse across the Kubernetes, and it's like another dimension that besides of the CLI, you can go through the visualized form, but it's not the 3D UI in the like server X form, but it's like the still the terminal based. And the last one, the KubeGraph, is another tool that allows to visualize the Kubernetes internals, which I'm not yet very close with, but I'm keeping an eye on and would like to start either using or at least to check on that.
Very good. And now for people who don't know you, can you tell us more about who you are, what you do, and where you work?
So my name is Oleksii Kolodiazhnyi. I'm from Kharkiv, Ukraine. I work in Mirantis as a senior architect. And as an architect, I communicate with the customers. I help them with extracting their desires, needs, and forming it into the requirements. I built the requirements in a generalized form and then help with designing a solutions for these customers. The solutions might be not only as the application of Mirantis technologies, but the helping the customers to build a information systems based on their requirements or their needs, let's say so.
Okay.
It
And
it
how
not
did you? Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. I wanted just to add that it includes a variety of technologies, the bare metal, networking, OpenStack, Kubernetes as well. So Kubernetes is not the only technologies that I'm working with.
Good to keep in mind. And how did you get into cloud native?
So let's start from the beginning and try to uh, put it clear what is cloud native. Can you please describe what you think cloud native is?
Ooh, it means many different things to many different people. I'd like to hear your
Mhm.
definition.
So what I understand under the cloud native is the certain clusterization that in general brings up a cloud that can. So what is the cloud? Is the distribution of these certain resources. And what is the cloud native application is the application that runs uh, natively for this type of cloud configuration. It uses the cloud capabilities, automation tools, APIs to run smoothly and efficiently on top of this platform. So I would say that I started working with clouds very closely uh, about 13 years ago when I actually joined Mirantis. It was back in 2012, I guess, something like that. And before that, I was working with, so I started actually my journey in IT starting in 2004. But I started as the system administrator, and mostly I was working with the servers, Unix, Linux, sometimes Windows, but very rarely. And mostly it was not the cloud-based solutions, but either a single servers or it was a certain clusters that brought up a like MySQL clustering for storage, for web servers, and so on. But when I joined Mirantis, I started closely working with OpenStack. So it was the virtualization. And somewhere from 2017, I started working with Kubernetes. And in 2019, Mirantis adopted Kubernetes, or I would say the containerization as the general platform for all Mirantis solution footprint. So if you remember at 90th, Mirantis acquired a Docker enterprise, and we heavily adopted the containerization technologies into all our product chain, including the OpenStack as well. So OpenStack become Mirantis OpenStack for Kubernetes, and it meant that we actually took a services of the OpenStack and put it as the workload on top of Kubernetes. So since then, all the products that Mirantis has, we built on top of Kubernetes one way or another. So since then, like 6 years already, I heavily work with the Kubernetes anyway.
Right. And the Kubernetes and cloud native ecosystem move very quickly. What works best for you to stay up to date with all the changes that are going on in terms of resources that you use, so that you can learn and not get lost with all the things that are happening?
You know, I was looking in different ways how to get this information in a better way. And I stopped that. I have a subscription onto multiple blog mm, blogs websites, let's say. So it's the cloud native. The biggest one is the cloud native and the Kubernetes one. And the main resource for me is the Reddit. So I found that Reddit shoots out the most recent and most interesting, edgy discussions, and it actually gives me a possibility to look through the most recent new repositories, new technologies, new decisions and so on. So this is like my main resource for the news around the Kubernetes.
Great. And if you could go back in time and share one career tip with your younger self, what would it be?
This is an interesting question because I was rolling back all my career from the very beginning until till now, and I found that I'm happy with everything. So I wouldn't give any advice for me because I think that I went from the ground basics, working with the networking, plugging switches, doing the wiring, and assembling the servers, and going to the architecture. And it was actually the way that I think benefits the most to be efficient on my current position. And I'm actually happy with all the steps I took.
Well, as part of our monthly content discovery, we found an article that you wrote titled Graphs in Your Head, or How to Assess a Kubernetes Workload. So we want to get into this a little bit further. First and foremost, Kubernetes has become the standard for running services, and you've developed a specific procedure for assessing Kubernetes workloads. What initially drove you to create this structured approach?
So I wouldn't say that I actually developed it. Maybe I summarized it in a certain way, because there are many frameworks and many approaches that describe how's the information system should be built and what is the life cycle of information system. Actually, I took the main idea from there and simplify it in a very, very straightforward way, because there are books, there are theory around that, and it's quite hard to consume. But I came to the idea that there are a lot of articles around about a certain piece of technology. Somebody writes how to set up a CI/CD platform, how to create a new repository swiftly, how to create a pipeline, whatever. But there is not enough articles around a theory of building the systems in general. So from the high level, from the theoretical, like academic level. And I was lucky very much. And I understood that during my work, I do a lot of stuff that can be interesting for other people. And once upon a time, I just stopped. So I did an assessment for one of the products. Actually, this is the MSR4 that was mentioned in the article. And I took the outcome of my work, simplified it a bit, and I decided to put it into the article just to be helpful for other people. Maybe it could interest someone. And if someone would search for such a guidance, how to assess the information system, to build it either from scratch or build in the top of existing footprint, then they would be interested in reading this article.
You mentioned that graphs are one of humanity's great inventions, and you always translate assessment results into graphs. Why is visualization so crucial for understanding Kubernetes workloads?
So why it is, first of all, why graphs? Because let's pretend that we have a system, any system. The system has multiple moving parts in it, any different components. And those components are connected between each other in a certain way. And you can actually do a variety of this combination, how those components are integrating. But anyway, you're ending up with the certain nodes when you have these components and with a certain connection between those. And this is basically what graph is. So you can use it in a very simplified form when you have just a straight graph with nodes, when you have the components and just a line that connects them. Or you can use your imagination, or if it's needed, you can make it more hard, more robust, add more additional description, additional connection. So it is easy to describe a system in such a way. This is the first item. And another item is that it is easy to present. So let's pretend that how it is better to present something to another person who is not very into this topic. You can give this person a list with a text, or you can give this person a picture with the diagram, and this faster you will describe a diagram, and faster this information will be consumed by this person. So using the graphs, using the diagrams, it's easier to present it to other person, and depending on this person background, and depending on the need, what you need to show on this graph, you can make it either on simplified way, or make it more harder, or more descriptive, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we do a monthly content analysis report where we look at, thousands of pieces of content in terms of blogs, articles that are moving around in the ecosystem. And oftentimes we've noticed the trend that, work that has visual elements that accompany it often does much better in terms of engagement and people's response to it. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. Your assessment approach follows a top-down strategy, starting from business understanding before diving into technical details. Can you walk us through why this sequence matters?
So first of all, we need to take a little glance onto the difference between the business language and technical language. And first of all, for the architect, it is important to understand why the system actually exists. So if you take a good engineer, but you will ask him how to do this implementation better, he might go deep into the technical details. He will say that, oh, it needs to be pretty, it needs to be very efficient, and so on. But if you will ask a businessman, he will say that it needs to bring a value. And this value always can be converted into a certain amount of money. And you, as an architect, you need to understand, first of all, the needs of the business, because the system will be built for the business cases and the business needs, to bring value for the owner, to bring a certain capacity, whatever. So first of all, a need of the system, and already a secondary thing will be the prettiness and ideal structure of the system. To not to go deep, to not to overcomplicate, good enough for bringing this value. And because of that, you need to start understanding the business needs. You take a very, very high level glance into the system, imagining that it is a certain black box for you, but you understanding the input data, output data, what controls the system, if the system controls something, who is the users, and so on. So you gather all the information around the system before going deep into it. Then you are going deeper, decomposing the system onto the next layer, and you already identify different services or even groups of services. So it depends on what type of detalization you need to go with all the layer. It depends on your needs. So you can jump right ahead onto the services, or you are just penciling in the certain areas like the networking, security, data storage, compute resources, whatever. It depends on the complexity of the system and your needs. So going down with this detalization, you describe each layer of this magnification of the system, and you get more and more understanding how it works already if you are assessing an existing system, or how it should work when you build it from scratch.
In the high level assessment phase, you gather business cases and use cases before any technical investigation. How do you extract this information effectively, especially when documentation might be sparse?
This is a good question, because in a role of architect, it's very important to know how to communicate with people and know whom you should communicate with. First of all, when you are coming to the project and you are starting a discussion, you need to get the list of people who are responsible for needed areas for you. So you get the contact of the product owner or whoever is responsible for the business needs of the system. Then you need to get the contact persons for each topic that you will concern building the system, like the network architect or engineer or whoever will be responsible for that. So starting from the business person and ending with the very very final person who will be responsible for the user onboarding, for example. So the main resource that you will got is the subject matter experts from the side of the customer.
Moving into infrastructure assessment, you emphasize understanding the installation method first, particularly favoring Helm charts. Why is the installation mechanism so important to understand early on?
So uh, when you're coming to a system that already exists and you already have a platform and certain implementation of the workloads, you need to understand how it works. And in order to do this, the easiest way is if it organized in a formal way, either with a certain packages, pipelines, or anything that automates and describe the communication between the services that been installed. Not only how it was installed, but also where it was installed from, how it was configured, and so on. So this is very important to understand how it was installed. Because from one side, it can be installed in automated fashion, like with the packages, with the certain pipelines, whatever. On the other hand, it can be installed simply manually, but some by some person who was already fired or went out from this company ages ago. It now you simply has a server or a cluster that runs something nobody knows how, and it complicates your approach significantly.
And when it comes to discovering resources in a workload, you use both command line tools and visual IDEs like Lens. How do you decide which tool to use for different situations?
So it depends on the convenience. Like uh, when you need to do something quick and you know what you are looking for, like for example, you need to take a look onto the list of the namespaces, for example. It's a simple comment one-liner. If you need to take a look of the policies, of the pods, of something that doesn't need uh very complicated filtering, and not only filtering, but maybe a comparison of different information output. In this case, you can use the CLI. At least for me, it's convenient. But on the other hand, when your request becomes more complex, and maybe if you need to compare some outputs, it's easier to use some visualized forms, and either it is in the console like K9s, or it is something more graphical as the lens, for example, or you can use some other tools that will visualize the structure for Helm charts, for example. So it depends on what the output you need to get, how fast and convenient you need to work with this output.
KubeView is one of your key tools for visualizing resource interactions within a Helm release. What insights does this visualization provide that you might miss with traditional approaches?
This is one of the ideas that uh, assessing a system is not very swift, giving you a feedback of how the system or how the workload actually looks like. And such visualized form that already presents it in a graphical way, very convenient when you need to take a first glance and faster get up to speed understanding what this workload is actually. So in case of this, this workload was installed with the Helm charts, and this tool allows you to assess this Helm chart and bring you the plot of the communication between these resources, this is actually the benefit of this tool. So just running it, you get the plot of the interaction of the services, knowing it from the way how it was configured in the Helm.
For developers who prefer terminal-based workflows, you mentioned K9s as a powerful option. How does this tool fit into your assessment workflow, especially for configuration deep dives?
So this is exactly the idea for I use the K9s. I use it for either checking the configuration instead of just plotting the comments and going between the instances. Like for example, the configuration of the pods. It's much easier just to navigate with the arrow keys and just using some hotkeys to jump from one instance, from one pod to another pod, or deployment to deployment, whatever. It's easier just to navigate, like in the console file manager. So this is the difference. Like either you are doing it as a pure console, writing cd, move, or whatever commands you use in the terminal to work with the files. And on the other hand, you have a file manager that allows you to see the structure, the tree structure of the files, and navigate easily between them. So this is actually the case. Also, what I use the K9s for is looking to the logs, because it's much easier rather than going through the logs in the console, and you can take a look on one at a time. And in another case, you have this this CLI, or I would say the console visualization form that provides you much more convenient way of consuming this data.
The Helm dashboard plugin appears to be valuable for chart management. What advantages does it offer over standard Helm CLI commands during assessment?
So basically the same. When you use the CLI, it's the path to get the answer that you have in your head, like what this chart is for, how it is configured. It needs much more actions you to take to get this outcome, rather than you just have it in the visualized form, and you can just go through the tree view of this configuration of the Helm chart. That's why it was one of the tools that allows you to consume information in visual form that is much faster. You can just take one glance on it and already understand what it is about, rather than going through the different commands and iteratively get this data.
You break down requirements into network, storage, hardware, and security categories. How do you ensure nothing falls through the cracks when documenting these diverse aspects?
This is a very good question, because it actually comes to the general approach, how you work with the architecture and how you work with the process. Because the process when you work is very important, and to not to lose anything. And here is why you need to have a certain templatized approach up front that you can enhance and adopt for different situations. This is actually why I came from with this simplified uh, process, how to assess the workloads, because you already have a certain template. You know where to start. You know what information you need to get, what will be the outcome, and where this information will be used in further, and what will be the next step. And this is very important. In the same way, when you have already a decomposition of different areas that you need to assess, whether it will be a networking, a storage, a security, a compute, whatever, you already have a certain template either in your head or somewhere stored, like a skeleton of the document that you will fill in. In this case, you already have a template of the information that you need to get, and how you need to fill it into the document. If you have a different system, a different software, something different, you may sit, think, and enhance your approach to adopt it for a particular needs and particular case.
Throughout the article, you use Mirantis Source Registry 4 as a concrete example. Could you share how this assessment framework helped uncover specific insights about MSR's architecture?
Yeah. So at some point, I was pulled in asking to assess the MSR4 application before it got released and provide my vision onto the reference architecture. So I wasn't very familiar with this release, and I had to go exactly from the top to bottom to understand what the development team was keeping in mind, what guided them to create this new release, what changes has been made comparing to the previous version, what services are involved, why they are involved, what use cases are behind the system, what they already took in mind, what they might miss, and so on. So uh, this is the approach that I described in the article was exactly the framework that I used for assessing this application. And starting from the business cases, I went down to the decomposition of the systems. I found out what systems are, how they work, how they should better work in different use case scenarios. For example, if you use the MSR4 just for testing, you can install it in a single node fashion, and it doesn't need a replication for the database, for example. But on another case, if you need to install it in an HA way, you have to install the multiple replicas of database and it should be replicated and so on. So this is already comes from the use cases and understanding of the services architecture, their interconnection and configuration. So this is actually why I put it as an example, because I already had a certain diagrams that I used, and I already had it, like just bake it. It was fresh in my memory, so I used it as the reference.
You emphasize that most tools should run remotely without cluster installation. Why is this remote first approach important for assessment workflows?
If you are an architect and you're just coming to the system that you doesn't know, and you shouldn't be invasive to the system. You should observe it and be as much as possible as the site observer. So you don't need to intervene and do anything that may harm to the system to bring some difference in the logs, to bring some alerts. For example, if you will run a privileged container, for example, and it will raise a huge thing in the security area. Anyway, you should do this in a read-only form. And this is the best way when you are just using your fleet of applications in already created environment that is convenient for you, like your laptop, for example, or a VM that you use for assessment. You just spin it up, you connect to the endpoint, and you are getting needed data. And then this fleet of your applications that you already used to just combust and throw the outcome that you are ready to consume.
The deliverables from your assessment process include various schemas, diagrams, and requirement documents. How do these artifacts benefit teams beyond the initial assessment?
This is actually a very important part. We are touching the documentation. The documentation as general is something that could be missed, and engineers are usually don't like to do it. But this is the main outcome of the architectural work when you bake in the diagrams and combine it into a consumable documentation. By consumable, I mean that when you're writing a document, you know, or you need to know whom this document actually targeted to, who will read it. In this way, you need to write it in a certain fashion. You need a certain terminology. For example, if you're writing it for or you're not a document, maybe it's a presentation. So this is a certain way of presenting the data, and you know that this presentation will be shown to the business persons. You don't need to put any technical details because it will simply be misunderstood and it will take a valuable time of the business people. That's why you are doing it in a certain fashion. And how it can be used beyond of the assessment, it's a system has its life cycle, and when you are doing something, it might be useful not only at the moment when you done the assessment and somehow reported in front of the business person, technical person, whoever, but you build the collateral of the documentation schema that might be used later on. For example, for the newcomers, the team just got a new administrator, DevOps, developer, whoever, and he needs to get up to speed. He takes your documentation and goes in a proper way, understanding why this system actually been created, how it works, and going deeper into a certain point that interests him. This is also very important when you are doing it where you're doing the documentation and design in this structured form from top to bottom. It allows easier to go through this document and find what exactly you need. So for example, you need to find a certain I don't know, the replication factor for the database once again. And how it can be done, you are going to the system, you are finding the storage part of the documentation, you go into this documentation, then there you find a certain service that represents the storage type, like the database. You go in there, and there in the configuration, somewhere in the configuration part, you will find the replication factor, whatever you need to find. So structure is important, language is important, and actually the framework how to do that.
You mentioned that not all applications are Kubernetes native, with some having hard-coded configurations buried in containers. How do you adapt your assessment approach for these challenging cases?
So this is exactly what I mentioned when what I was saying about the way of installation, and this is the similar thing. When you have a cloud native application, so when we started our discussion about what is cloud native, and cloud native, as I said, it's the adoption of the functionality of the platform, its capabilities to organize the work of the application in the most efficient form. And in this case, for example, as in Kubernetes, you know that you are running a certain application. It uses the secrets or volumes or some structural parts of the platform to store its data, and you know where to search. On the other hand, when you have a completely custom thing that was just taken as the legacy and somehow virtualized or containerized, you have no idea how to and what to find. That's why the first very best approach is to find someone who did it and extract this data from this expert. If it's not possible, then you have to improvise and somehow use tools to assess. So you need to read about this application, what would be the best practices, try to understand how this person, the author of this implementation, let's say, how he may did it, and basically improvise.
And for teams looking to implement a similar assessment framework, what would be your key advice for getting started and avoiding common pitfalls?
So I would suggest, first of all, to build a structure, understand the approach, and find out whether this process is totally clear for them and their use case. Once they understood that this approach is applicable, they need to understand and go step by step in their heads how they will do the assessment. Also, which is very important that I want to mention, is the so-called role game. When you, as an architect, you're wearing different hats. You are trying to put yourself onto the position of different roles of different people, trying to understand how it would be done or how it should be done from perspective of developer, what it's needed from perspective of business owner. And this is the constant role-playing game when you are putting yourself into this position. Also, what is important is questioning yourself, why are you doing it? Because sometimes when you're getting burnt out, when you are working on a certain topic for weeks, for example, you're simply losing track, and you have this idea to get rid of this task as soon as possible. But you have to stop. You have to consider, why are you doing it and for whom you are doing it. Because when you are trying to get rid of it as soon as possible, you can simply skip something and lose track of something. But when you are rereading what you wrote, what you designed, from perspective of consumer, from the business owner, for example, you see it other way, and you understand better that here is the gap, here is the pitfall that I simply missed. And this is very important. So changing the roles, putting yourself into different sides, not only playing for this side, but also trying to put yourself as the customer or engineer or whoever, it's very important.
Oleksii, what's next for you?
Currently, I have a very interesting project that is running around AI, and not just AI as developing AI, but AI as the platform, as infrastructure for AI. So I think that next step for me would be getting deeper into this area, and because this is a very interesting thing. And maybe I will have some passion and some interest topics to write about.
Sounds good. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I hope that you will share my LinkedIn page and maybe my working email. It's also, I think, available on the LinkedIn page. So I think that the best way is the LinkedIn. It's public. It's a good way to communicate, and this is the case.
Fantastic. Well, it was wonderful speaking to you and learning about your experience. Hope our paths cross again in the future. Take care.
Thank you.